Well, welcome to this week's episode of The Dental Guys. I'm Wes, the Dental Guy.
And I'm John, the Dental Guy. And Wes, it's good to be back. The summer's in full swing, and I'm excited to be recording. In fact, I'm just excited to be in the air conditioning because it's been brutal.
Dude.
So it's nice. For those of you who are the lawnmowers, we often bring it up and we say, this is where many podcasts are consumed, is on the throne of the mower. And I don't know about your area, Wes, but we've not been mowing a whole lot because the heat's coming. But this is lawn mowing season. It's vacation season. It's the time to be doing stuff. And I think it's the time when podcasts are most consumed, Wes. Would you agree?
I think it's great. We're all traveling. We're all flying. We're driving somewhere. You've got your earbuds in, headphones on. Maybe you need to pull off and watch the Dental Guys on YouTube. Subscribe. We're at 3,000 subscribers on there. We're at 3,000
did you know
subscribers.
that we have a video? You can look at our actual
We need some
ugly
likes.
mugs.
We need some likes.
No, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that says something, Wes. I don't know.
I mean, most of our listeners are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We get our downloads from audio.
You're sitting on the tarmac on a 4-hour delay. Probably it's American. Let's just be honest. And and you've been waiting. You've already, been put. They say, "Oh, we're going to stay at the gate," and then they push back, and they go to the taxi, and then they wait, and then it's a ground stop, and then it's a hurricane in Barbados. Right? That's just how it goes.
Hey,
so
listen.
you're on here. You've listened to 17 podcasts, and this is 18. And I'm going to tell you right now, Wes, tonight, it's not going to be a waste of time.
No, it's not. I'm
not
excited
gonna be a
about
waste
part
of time.
2 of this podcast. Is it ride or die? Yeah. Are you riding or dying? Love it. All right. Before we get to that, I
want to talk about this is one of my favorite sponsors of all time, Wes. This is the Dental Crafters Network. And as many of our listeners know who have been with us for a long time, we do not endorse things we don't believe in or use. And we definitely believe in and use the Dental Crafters Network, built on a foundation of unwavering dedication and respect. The Dental Crafters Network is a family-owned dental laboratory with 30-plus years of history, enriching the customer experience through their core values, responsiveness, versatility, and trust. They collaborate with you to meet your patient's unique needs. Experience a difference and receive 10% off your first case when you tell them the Dental Guys sent you. Call the Dental Crafters Network today at 1-800-472-8302. That's 800-472-8302. Or visit the Dental Crafters. Visit dentalcrafters.net. Thank you to the Dental Crafters for being a longtime sponsor.
Appreciate Dental Crafters Network. Also appreciate Restorative Driven Implants. Hey, are you ready to implement dental implants into your private practice? Are you just chomping at the bit to take some teeth out and do an immediate extraction, immediate placement? John and I are founders of the Restorative Driven Implant curriculum, and we are proud to talk about restorative driven implants, and I really appreciate them sponsoring the show this year. Listen, head over to restorativedrivenimplants.com and learn how you can start your implant journey right now with core classes. I'm still involved teaching there somewhat, and so I'm super excited to say that, hey, we want you guys to have the highest level of education when it comes to dental implant education and the surgical principles surrounding that of. But not only that, a restorative-driven mindset, guided surgery, U.S.-based surgery. It's amazing. So 715-207-6587. Make sure you mention the Dental Guys and let them know we sent you there because that helps us out. So I really appreciate that. John, as you know, 865-544-8954. The texts just keep coming in. Recently, I got a text, and it says, hey, Wes and John, I'm a longtime listener and dental nerd. Love the episodes with Brad, the dental lab guy, and now Derek, the mechanical engineering dental lab guy. Love it.
Love it.
Because I live in Wisconsin. I was curious if you would ever do an episode on the effects of zirconia opposing other restorations. I have 3Y opposing EMAX, and it just makes me curious. Also, it would make my day if you would go out and follow my Instagram page. And I did. I went and followed her Instagram page, and I really appreciate Sarah reaching out to the dental guys about zirconia and does it wear appropriately to that of
And
EMAC.
she said 3Y.
Yeah,
She said 3Y.
3Y.
She's
So John,
making it clear. That is it's called virtue signaling. When you're like, I got some 3Y. It's more tetragonal. It's not as cubic as you might think. And you're like casually say 3Y. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I like this lady already. She's
you know
wonderful.
what's great about Sarah is that she's a dental coach. She's not even a dentist, and she's geeking out with us. So, Sarah, if you listen to this, shout out to Sarah. John, in real quick, this is hard for us, Sarah, but in real quick, we know, and I'll answer this against teeth, we know that polished zirconia is very kind to the opposing dentition. I mean, it has wear characteristics that are similar to that of enamel against enamel. The key is the polish. And we know from the University of Alabama and some great research that was done there in years past that it proved that zirconia, which has been around for almost 30 years now in use, that it has great wear characteristics opposing that of enamel. Now, John, I don't know a study that tells us the wear characteristics against lithium disilicate, which we recently talked about on the Bob and Greg show. John, do you know a study?
So what my understanding of that is that if you have, and it is interesting when you start to talk about wear characteristics, my understand, and you brought this on me without me being able to prep. I can't pull it up by memory. I don't have it in front of me. But I do know that when you have adequate thickness of lithium disilicate, which is important, and you have a polished surface, that the wear characteristics are quite similar, although zirconia is still the best.
That's right.
So I think it's a great question. I think that there's a couple things real quick to say. I think we can say that polished zirconia has the best wear characteristics against opposing dentition. I think when you add in a ceramic restoration, we've had discussions about this with full arch, that there may be some questions about should we have dissimilar materials opposing each other, simply because of weak points being easier when you have dissimilar materials to find versus things that are equal strength. But I think that against lithium disilicate, I've not seen any concern about those materials opposing each other with adequate thickness.
John, I'll chime in here just for a second before we go on to the main part of the show. And man, it's going to be a showstopper tonight. Super excited about this one. But I will say is that most 3Y zirconia crowns have a glaze because they have to do some type of staining to give it some character. And over time, that glaze does wear down with normal attrition and exposes the pearl. You'll see it in a lot of our patients. It'll look pearl. That actually is the part that's kind to the opposing dentition, not the glaze. And we know most EMAX crowns have an inherent ability to be polished as well. And so what I would say, Sarah, to you is that the curiosity is great, but I would say that put your fears aside, that if you have polished ceramics, regardless of the glaze is more abrasive than the actual ceramics themselves in most cases. And so if you keep these restorations serviced in a polished way for a very long time, and a dentist hasn't taken a diamond burr, and like ground the heck out of it, like a lot of times I see zirconia crowns that I'm kind of touching up from other dentists, is that you're in good hands with that restoration. It should serve you for a very, very long time. And both of them
are better by far than veneering ceramic.
Feldspathic
veneering
is terrible.
Ceramic comparatively is a much bigger problem than anything polished that's monolithic. I think that's one thing to take home. If you're going to leave your occlusion in something, leave your occlusion in a polished material, and I think you're going to be just fine. But great question, Sarah.
Geeks Corner tonight. Yeah, as the monologue.
Geeks Corner.
865-544-8954. Reach out to the dental guys by text. Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, the YouTube's comments, please. I did get a comment the other night, and it's a good one too. We'll bring it up on the show maybe in another time. But tonight, John, super excited about part 2. Welcome to part 2 of this podcast. Hey, listen, if you haven't heard part 1, you just need to stop the lawnmower, pull the car over, and go over to subscribe to the Very Dental Podcast, Alan Mead's podcast, and look up the student edition that released prior to this on Is It Ride or Die? Compare and contrast the narrow versus the broad in continuing education. Our look into comprehensive dentistry. The last one we just talked about, amazing. We talked about what is comprehensive dentistry. I think you'll be surprised about that. So if you just need to stop right now and go back and listen to that show before we go on to this one. I'd like to bring on our guest tonight. It's good to have Mohamed joining the show. Welcome to the Dental Guys podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, John and Wes, for that great introduction.
So, Mohamed, you are a third-year dental student, and you run the dental student segment of the Very Dental Podcast, and super excited to have you on the show tonight. And you posed the question, what is comprehensive dentistry? And we're here tonight to talk more about that and answer more of your questions surrounding our journey. So welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your journey into dentistry.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be on. This is one of the shows that I am very much a fan of and subscribe to, so it's great to be on here with you guys today. So a quick introduction to myself. I'm a third-year dental student at the University of Oklahoma. Just started my third year about a month ago. So I grew up in Stillwater, Oklahoma, small college town, home of Oklahoma State. And I don't have any family members in dentistry or anything like that. I honestly just at orientation at Oklahoma State, first day of orientation, they were like, what major do you want to do? What do you want to do after you get out of here? I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to do pre-dental. So that's after a pretty much thoughtless decision. That's what got me started on this path. And I got in, shadowed, liked what I saw, and here I am now, and armed with questions and ready to learn.
That's awesome. So in our last show, John, Mohamed, we discussed what is comprehensive dentistry. And really it came down to that comprehensive dentistry is more than just doing procedures that are, multifaceted, more than just doing, hey, I do ortho, I do periosurgery, I do implants now. It's more than a procedural mindset. And you can go back and listen to that whole show. It was a great show. Super excited for part 2. But tonight, John, Mohamed, we're going to discuss what are the strategies and that it takes to learn as a dentist treatment planning, comprehensive dentistry. What is the path, and what path did we take, John? Mohamed, why would you be interested as a new graduate and your graduates in comprehensive dentistry now?
Well, I would say that, it's good to know what it is. What is comprehensive dentistry? And I think that's something that we definitely answered in the first part of the podcast that was released last week on my show. And really, we're going into this field. We should know the options that are available for us. And then if we decide that we do want to go become comprehensive dentists, I think it'd be very helpful to know, well, how can we even do that? Which is what I'm hoping to get answered, or at least one way that you might be able to do that, which is coming from you guys' personal experience.
John, we established.
And I think that's. Oh, go ahead, Wes.
Well, I was going to say we established last show that the first step is to become really good at communication and the basics of dentistry, to be inspiring to your team members, to want to pursue excellence in dentistry, and surrounding yourself with people that are inspirable. And John, if we were going to go back and kind of look at kind of the strategies we employed as, what CEs would we start taking? What courses? Where would our journey begin in this idea of comprehensive dentistry from the time we graduate dental school and going forward?
Yeah, and it's such a great question, and I would say there's not one right path for every person. I think again, as we said in the last show, you do have to know your market. You have to know the practice that you're in. You have to know the things that are the most needed, and sometimes those things are different. And so sometimes I think it's easy to say, well, here's the path that I took or Wes took, but they're going to be different for you and where you are. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you're in a practice where you have somebody who is excellent at molar endo, they just do it all the time. They've been doing it forever. They love it. They're passionate about it. You can take two approaches. One is you can try to be like them and continue to build the practice that direction. Well, the other is you can say, you know what, they're doing a great job at that. I'm going to focus on something else. Whereas you might be in a practice that maybe you're in a small town, you don't have a root canal specialist and you're the sole doctor. Maybe your focus needs to be on molar endo because that's something you enjoy and something you want to focus on. So, those are just some examples, but I think the focus early on and even later on, if you're not already there, is to become, in my opinion, first, to become someone who is truly an expert at the things that dental school taught you. And, if you don't know the bonding material that you're using and how many seconds it should be on the tooth and what type of air you should be blowing on it to air dry it and how long it should be cured and how to properly place a matrix band and get repeatable, excellent contacts and polish properly and do a great composite, kind of shame on you, right? Because you should know these things. This is a basic. So you need to become good at basics, get good at composite, get good at crowns, get good at root canals. And there are lots of great courses, and we're not going to necessarily list every course that's out there. There's lots of great courses, largely supported by companies even that are relatively inexpensive, who can say, hey, look, we're not going to necessarily brainwash you. We're going to say, hey, look, if you're using our rotary endo system, here's somebody who's an expert at it who can teach you how to use it at a higher level than what you learned in dental school. Or if you're using our bonding material or our composite, or if you're using our, our lab, maybe the lab can say, here's some tricks on how to take a better impression or a better scan. So I think getting really good at basics should be our first step. And that could take years. It doesn't have to be that it's a race. It's a matter of knowing your market and getting good at the basics. But just to give you some examples, again, I would look at talking to product reps of reputable companies saying, hey, you know what? I'm new out of school. I want to get better at bonding. I want to understand what bonding materials I should be using, or what's your company doing as far as training? Talking to root canal, manufacturers, talking to endo file system folks, talking to your dental labs, talking to implant manufacturers. Hey, can you show me how your pieces and parts work for your particular implant system so I know what a closed tray impression coping looks like and I know what an open tray impression coping looks like? Talking to scanner companies. Hey, can you show me how to scan with your scanner? Can you come in and do some continuing education? What kind of toothpaste should we be recommending to our patients? What kind of toothbrush should we be using? Should it be an electric? What should we use? Water picks? And these are things that, again, you get a basis on in school, but then you can come out and you can build on that very inexpensively. But more to your question. Okay. So whatever that looks like in your market, expanding the basics or becoming better at the basics, what is maybe the next step? And I think the next step has to come, it's my opinion, once you have done enough basic dentistry that you start to see failures. Until you start to see things that don't work. Now, that sounds terrible, right?
Crown's
Isn't it?
coming
You
off.
just go out,
Sensitivity's out the roof.
Yeah. Isn't it just that you should go out and you should take the first course? Like,
my root canals are short, Phils.
Right.
I can't get down the canals. I'm blocking myself out all the time. I'm not.
Right.
I can't get. Every time my lab calls, they're calling me because they're saying they can't see my margins. I'm struggling using impression material. Like, I don't know how to.
Every time I put those incisal composites on number 9, they always chip off. And every
let's just
time
keep it real, man. I mean, like, hey, people are getting frustrated because they keep coming back because I can't seem to get, and my team is mad at me because I'm seeing all these post-operative things. My sutures are coming out because I'm trying to do stuff I've really not done before,
Yep. I think you have to see where there's a fundamental thing that you're missing. And I think that the fundamental thing that you're going to start to see coming up again and again and again, and at least I believe this is where most people start down this path of deciding whether they want to pursue it, is in wear patients. In wear patients. In patients that have patterns of wear that you don't really understand. You just know they're breaking your stuff.
Yeah,
You know that you have a lot of occlusal adjustments are happening. You're doing a lot of adjustments on these patients. You're making them night guards because you don't know what else to do. You're taking models on them to talk about some type of full mouth reconstruction, even though you don't even really know.
I'm going to open the vertical.
Right. You're looking at them like maybe. Right. They break the third composite that you put on number 9 incisal, or they break a perfectly good crown, and you start to go, all right, I've taken out 3 teeth on this patient because they fractured them, or they keep breaking my stuff, and I'm not sure why. I know teeth aren't where they need to be. I know the teeth are wearing down. I know like this one's longer than this one, and I know that there's some problems with the way they're hitting. I don't really know what to do. And so then you determine at that point, and there's going to be a patient or 2 or 3 or 5, not 100. There's going to be a patient or 2 or 3 or 5 of these that you're going to hit a wall with them where they've come back 3 or 4 times with problems that are similar. And you're going to start to see some patterns, and you're going to realize that you're not really sure what's going on. You're not really sure what's going on. And so a lot of dentists, what do they do at that point? They take models. They remember enough about their training. They're like, okay, I know I need to get models. Maybe they get a face bow. Maybe they mount the case, whatever it is that they do. They're like, all right, now I have models of this patient. And you look at it and you go, all right, what next?
Yeah, basically they call the lab and they say, hey, I'm going to do this case. Can you help me? Mm-hmm. And I think that brings up a good point, is like you start finding people that have been down this road, or know someone that has. So for instance, you're going to start asking questions about the bond that you're using because you're having problems with sensitivity, and you ask it to the rep and you say, hey, I really want to know more about bonding. I want to make sure I'm doing it right. What key opinion leader do you all have that I can go listen to and talk to? And I guarantee you they're going to have somebody. And most likely that person has been in practice long enough. And then there'll be somebody you can ask other questions to. And what will end up happening is that you'll start asking enough questions from people. And what it'll lead to is a decision that you have to make to spend money beyond what's cheap but good CE. So we've always said that the first step is cheap but good. And the cheap but good CE is going to come with learning how to do crown preps, learn how to pack cord, learn how to use tissue retraction, learn how to do bonding, make sure your buildups don't come out whenever you're taking your temporaries off, when you're delivering your crowns, how to just be a good single tooth dentist, and then how to navigate quadrant dentistry, MODs, DOs, all that stuff, how to manage temporaries and that kind of thing. So those are the things that are cheap but good. You can get that just about any trade show and from any key opinion leader from these organizations like, to mention a few, 3M, Kerr, those companies like that are bigger, that can afford to pay somebody to speak. Then what'll happen is you'll be intrigued enough, and somebody will be a key opinion leader will say, and they said it to me, and said, Wes, have you ever thought about going on taking to the next step? Because I feel like you're a concerned dentist. And I'm like, well, what is that? And that's going to an institution where they teach diagnosis and treatment planning. to a different level. And that's where you have to make a decision on treatment philosophy. Now, back in the day, 20 years ago, choosing a treatment philosophy was somewhat of an argument. Now, today, it's a little more, I would say we're not seeing that right now. And so you got to pick one. You got to choose. And there's four that we typically hear come up today and amongst our circles. And we hear about Spear and Coyce. Those are probably the top two that John and I hear about. You know, Frank Spear and John Coyce used to practice together. And Frank and them, they decided to go separate ways. We won't get into that, but Frank has his place in Scottsdale, and John has his place in Seattle. And so both similar treatment philosophies and different ways of kind of doing different things, but you have to decide. And most likely you're going to be influenced in one way versus another. We have our opinion.
I want to say, though, just to unpack this for a second, because for those who are maybe in dental school or just, they might have heard a couple of these, but what are we talking about here? Right?
Yeah.
Because I want Wes to continue with the names of very important. But what are we talking, like what's the leap, right? You have these people that you're maybe seeing issues with, right? You see these repeated problems,
You're frustrated.
patterns, and you're kind of like, I'm not really sure what to do. And then maybe you start to go, all right, if I understood certain things, could I predict this better? Could I be able to anticipate problems, realize that it maybe wasn't, for instance, the material you were using, or it wasn't the technique that you were using. Maybe there's something more that prosthodontists get taught in their 2 or 3 years of residency. For instance, besides just full mouth rehabs, okay, or making a denture for those who you refer to them because you don't know how to make it. Maybe there's a little more. And that is what we're talking about here. We're talking about when someone walks in, how do you think about their case? And so when you start to talk about these names that Wes is starting to go through, the idea of these places or these folks, these names, is people that can teach you to think in an algorithm more, a way of having a systematized, a systematized, decision-based way of looking at every patient who walks into the practice. Will help you to understand the patterns that you're seeing. Why are they there? And how can we anticipate what will happen if we treat them this way, this way, this way, or this way, and where do they need to go next? So anyway, that's what we're talking about when we talk about these kind of treatment philosophy places. They all have slightly different ways of doing the same thing, which is to try to get you to think in a systematic and a little bit more advanced way that you really can only start to think about once you start to think more about the big picture. So Wes, continue. So what are some of the other
the thing,
groups?
I'll expand upon that, and then I'll go back to the decision of which group to choose and how to do that. I think the thing that, the other day I had a patient that he had some concerns and he had some work that was done that was beyond normal single tooth dentistry, and I saw some issues with that, and I was concerned, and I mentioned a few things, and he said, yeah, during the temporary phase, everything was popping off all the time. I couldn't keep the temporaries on, and I created awareness for his problem, and he was like, man, that's it. He was like, how can you go ahead and fix that? And I said, yeah. I said, here's what we're going to do. Here's what it would take to fix your case. And so we worked on fixing his case. And when I set him down to get him anesthetized, and he said, I'm really nervous. And I said, about the shot? I said, because we got that, bro. I said, he ain't going to feel a thing. And he said, no, because I'm worried that the temporaries are going to pop off. And so I said, look, Brad, if that happens, that's telling me something. And so it's not telling, and I said, and I told Brad this because he's an engineer. I said, Brad, it has nothing to do with the strength of material I'm using. In fact, I want you to break them now. Because if you're going to break them now in the next 30 to 60 days, okay, that's going to help me give you a better result long term. And so we've already done some things, Brad, to kind of help develop confidence in our treatment strategy here. And he said, yes, I understand that. And so even to the day of the preparation, he was concerned because he had a dentist that just did dentistry. Okay. So any one of these organizations that we're talking about, Spear, Coyce, Pankey, Dawson, to mention the four that I feel like comes up the most, you're going to go onto their website and you're going to see basically who they are and what they're about. They're about lifelong learning commitment. And this is not a journey that happens in one weekend. And it's a journey of unlocking and turning your brain into something that you didn't know about, and you unlock. And basically what John described in the previous podcast is you begin to see what you didn't see. You begin to know what you didn't know. And so we are big advocates of choosing a lifelong learning commitment in the realm of dentistry. And it starts with simple single tooth, good adhesive dentistry, following learning how to do quadrant dentistry. And then from there, you start to see things happening. You have to see failures. And so, I would choose one of these organizations. We are partial to one. I'm just going to tell you we're partial to Spear Education because it's the one we chose. And the reason why we chose it was because we had people telling us to choose this based on our philosophy on care and Frank's philosophy on care, which was a caring attitude. And we thought we knew what we were getting into, which was we want to do more big cases. And that's really what it's not about. None of these courses. Now, I haven't been to the other ones, but I know people that speak and teach, and I've been taught from people that teach at these other organizations. It's not what it's about, Mohamed. It's about learning how to see what you don't see coming out of dental school. And even in the first 4 or 5 years of practice, what it helps you to understand, oh, that's why that stuff's breaking. Oh, that's why that's not working. It has nothing to do with my materials. It has everything to do, and there are technique courses at these places, but it primarily has to do with a philosophy of diagnosis and then choosing a treatment strategy from there. John?
Yeah, I think that's a good start. The biggest thing again is just to try to. It's not that we're saying that you can't go and do these things right out of school. It's not that we're saying that. It's just that I think there's a lot more value in much the same way that I always advocate that people that want to go start placing dental implants right out of school, get some experience with restoring dental implants before they go and start placing dental implants. It's not that you can't go do it the other way. Of course you can. You do whatever you want as a general dentist, right? But if you haven't seen failures, if you haven't seen things go wrong, and if you haven't dealt with where things need to go, and that is really what these groups will teach you, much in the way that how did we learn dentures? We learn dentures by where 8 and 9 need to go, right? That's the first thing. Where do we put 8 and 9? And this person sits down and they just tell you. It's arbitrarily. They'll say, okay, 8 and 9. All right, here's where they go in the average person. You're going to show this much lip at rest position. You're going to show this much tooth at rest based on your age, length of your lip. You're going to show this much display when we have a high smile. This is what the curve of Wilson is. This is what the curve of Spee is. They enlighten you to things that are known as to what makes a beautiful and functional and aesthetic smile. So they just are telling you these things. And you then all of a sudden, you go, oh, okay, I know how to set denture teeth now. I start with 8 and 9. I put it here in the face. This is how I figure out the aesthetics, the phonetics, the function, the occlusion. And much in the same way, these groups will help you to understand where do we begin in cases where we need to have a way of thinking through things, because every denture will start with the same thing, right? Every single denture will start with the same thing. And you have a systematic way to approach dentures. Doesn't mean some of them aren't different in some ways. Doesn't mean there are certain techniques that can make your denture better. But the way of thinking about the denture is generally going to be the same. And this is how we're starting to think differently. But we want you to also remember that you have to start with, again, understanding some basics and having enough experience under your belt to be able to appreciate some of these things that don't work. Sometimes it makes you understand more where you need to be getting better.
So, and I think
So,
also
Mohamed, this is a lot to take in.
This is a lot to take in. And I think different people have different learning strategies, or like they learn things differently in different ways. And one thing that I know that Spear does is they do a good job of really slowing down. They used to teach things like over a period of originally it was over 5-6 days you would spend time. And there are other places you can go that still do it this way. But Spear has even taken things and pared it down into 2 and 3 days, and then you go back and you digest this information. And some places are really striving, like Spear, to create community where you can interact with people post. And I think that's really important because some people need that. Some people need a place where they can go and find someone to continue to talk to, because if you do go to a rural area, like we discussed, where it might be the demographic that you don't have another dentist as a mentor in your community, or the dentist you bought your practice from or taking over from isn't that person that you're wanting to change that practice, then you're going to need some people to kind of help you. And what we found is that that's one of these things that these organizations have really tried to do. Particularly, I feel like Spear is trying to do more of that with Spear study clubs and now webinars and things like that. I don't want to sound like a commercial for Spear, but this is what you're getting involved in. This isn't a weekend warrior course where you go and learn veneers. This is not that. There are those out there. Like, you could try to piecemeal this together and you probably would be unsuccessful, John. We felt like that we knew more than we knew when we went there. I would say that we knew less when we went there after taking the first course. We came away with what John said, saying that everybody needs this now. And we said a certain word. I'm not going to say it. We're like, oh my gosh, does everybody need this? And we're like looking at our own cases and we're just like, dude, I got to go back and tell them, And I think that a weekend just piecemealing all these things together is a very difficult thing to do and very frustrating, because you don't have continuity of the treatment philosophy. And that is a very dangerous thing. And I think that I would urge anyone listening to this, pick a path, follow that path to completion. Even if you don't change anything in your practice, learn, digest. I hope you change. I mean, I think this is fantastic. I'm biased, but learn it, dive into it, become an expert in it, and then put it into play. And it's easier said than done, but I would not recommend trying to do this on your own and trying to pick and choose and make your own path and try to nitty gritty. There's too many companies to choose from now, that are doing it well. And you can try that way, but that's not my recommendation. Mohamed?
Yeah, so kind of my follow-up question here would be, John, you mentioned that you really need to be practicing the fundamental dentistry first for a while and start seeing your failures come up before you're really ready for a treatment planning course or philosophy like this. Would you say that's just so that you have enough of a kind of neural network of cases that you've worked on and patients that you've seen, and then you do identify those failures, so then when you go to these treatment planning courses, you can start making connections? Is that why you would suggest waiting?
Yeah, to me, it's about pattern recognition. That's what it is. And that's what dentistry is. If I could really break dentistry down into like two things. It's storytelling and it's pattern recognition. In other words, it's knowing how to first recognize patterns and identify what's going on. And then second, it's being able to take the information and then relate it in the form that we really communicate well through storytelling. It's being able to explain what the beginning, middle, and end is to a patient, much in the same way that we tell a story on a podcast or in a great book. And the reason that I say it's best, and again, I'm not saying I know everything with this. I just think it's best based on the folks that I've seen that have been the most successful with going to courses that teach you how to think differently. How do you know what to change unless you have enough of a pattern that you see something that's not working, or you see failures that seem to be kind of a repetitive pattern? Maybe you don't even recognize the pattern until someone points it out to you, but you've done enough of it to go, wait, you're telling me every time that I've seen this, oh my goodness, now I want to go, I'm going back and I'm thinking in my mind, oh, that was that patient, that was that patient, that was that patient. This is why that wasn't working properly. And if you don't have that, I'm not saying you can't be successful. You can learn from others. Of course, you can learn from others, as we all do. And you can take someone else's experience, just like maybe a great lecture. You know, there's lots of lecture types, right? There's some types of lectures where people just go up and they show you case after case after case after case. And you know what? There's value in that. Okay. You're learning from someone else's experience, and hopefully in a more compact way. But there is no way that that's equivalent to just one of your own failures, one of your own patterns of failures. Maybe it's 3 patients, 4 or 5 who affected you personally, who caused you to have to redo stuff at your own expense, who caused maybe they left the practice because your stuff was breaking all the time. Maybe they came in for an emergency on Saturday. You know, that stuff is real to you. And once it becomes real to you, and then you have someone sort of illuminate this, oh, here's why, here's the pattern, all of a sudden it becomes, I think, much more, you take it to heart much more. It happens faster, the change, or the way, in my opinion, that you start to implement it, how much it affects you. And frankly, too, there's a financial side to this.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, or, you know, multiple courses, it could be a lot more than that. In my opinion, there's a certain bang for the buck of you doing it when you're ready, because you'll get more out of it. And this is just my opinion, right? It doesn't mean that I'm right for everyone. Lots of people, I've met people out at Spear that have, you know, they've been out for 6 months. They're taking the course. I'm like, hey, cool. I'm glad you're here. But I do know in the back of my mind, when somebody brings something up in the audience, like, you know, every time I do this and this and this, and this person's like, I've never even done that. You know, I've never even done one of those things you're talking about having done because you've been in practice for 5 years. It's tough to have the same.
I mean, if you go out to one of these organizations and you're having trouble packing cord, you've probably not been in practice long enough to really, you know, there's certain things. You know, John Maxwell said, and I love John Maxwell, without failure, I mean, or there is no success without failure. And so there has to be failure in anything in life for you to recognize the need for improvement. I mean, otherwise, what's the bar? If you're always successful, then you never see anything that you need to improve in.
Well, there's also the patterns that you learn, right? Again, going back to the team. If you've been in the trenches with your team for a little while and you've seen some things that didn't go well, and you've been trying to emphasize, hey, I'm going to learn, I'm going to read some journals, I'm going to do some CE courses, I'm trying to get good at it, and your team has trust in you, and that only comes with time. It only comes with time. When you do have this pattern recognition, you come back to the office, you go, hey guys, you know, all this time that I thought this was the problem, and remember how we had that, the temps kept falling off, or the veneer popped off 7 times, or my composites were whatever. They go, oh my goodness, because they were there with you. They've been through the same thing, and you get buy-in from your team. Versus if you literally graduate school, you go out 3 months later, you take 17 courses at Spear or Pankey or Dawson. You come in, you have no authority. You have no authority with you. You think you do. You think you run the place. You don't. Your team runs the place. Your team is everything. And if you come in thinking you know it all when you've only done 3 crowns,
Oh man,
you just don't. So
forget it.
I think there's this practicality aspect of this too, of first of all, seeing your own failures. Second of all, building trust with your patients, with your team, to where when you come back and you go, you know what? I've learned ever since I saw you last, Mrs. Jones, I've learned something new, and my team has learned something new. And I want to talk to you about it because it's interesting and it's changing the way I'm thinking about dentistry. Your team's like, yep, that's exactly right. Mohamed took this course. He's done, we did 50 crowns together. We had the same problem on 30 of them. And now like we're not having that problem anymore. And the team believes you. The patient has buy-in. They've seen you more than once, and this is where I think you build a successful practice, not just the knowledge, but a practice.
Let me give you some quantitative things to take away from this. One, it takes 2 prophy cycles. Okay. 2 prophy cycles. That's 2 years. Okay. Before you're going to really even see any type of composite failure that is significant enough to really see a pattern. You're going to really, to see your dentistry on an x-ray, you need to be in the practice for at least 2 prophy cycles. The interesting thing is that in my town, right down the street, is several DSOs, and I know from patients that come into my practice that the dentists have been there less than 6 months to a year, and they just continually rotate in and out. And so they never get to see. So your greatest success was the last composite you did, but you never did see it. Where did it go? So you need to be in a practice for at least 2 prophy cycles. And so that's a couple years to be able to see. So that's some things to think about as I'm an owner and I have an associate, and John does too. We're waiting to see how is he doing technically before I make even a greater investment in him from a standpoint of taking him to CE. Like, is he ready or she ready? Another thing about this team building, a couple books that I would consider reading, How to Win Friends and Influence Others. It's an amazing book on how to communicate with people.
It's the best ever. How to win
friends and influence others. Read it tomorrow.
People, and that's one of the most. I mean, you can never read it enough times.
I've read it probably 5 times in my life. Okay, I would say another book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team building. And I would say anything John Maxwell on leadership is just good fundamentals on just how to be a leader, because dentists aren't trained to be leaders. Some of us have it innately. Some of us have the ability to speak publicly innately. But if you just take How to Win Friends and Influence Others and read that and read that and read that, and then from there you go to leadership concepts from John Maxwell. And then from there you maybe go to team building from Patrick Lencioni, and you learn how to be a team leader. And I think those are some key things that I would take away from this. And then from there, it's about choosing your path and finding someone that can help you make good decisions. I wouldn't spend this kind of money on CE at any of these individual things without having a friend with me. I will say that John going with me and surrounding myself with my dental lab person has been the greatest thing that we've ever done, is take this journey together with someone. They don't have to be in your practice. In fact, it's probably better that they're not. And so that would be my next recommendation. Don't spend this money until you talk to somebody that spent the money to make sure you're doing it at the right time. And then number 2, take it with somebody that wants to go down this path. The rest is like, what procedures do you want to add? Well, that's an interesting thing, because you can't do it all. You can, and I know people trying, but I used to think you could. John, can you do it all?
Nope.
You can't. And so, like, when you ask what procedures would you add to your practice first and why, that's a very difficult question to ask, because there are definitely procedures that I think that are more business oriented and more efficient and productive wise. And I think that if you have a restorative mindset, they make sense. But I'm very careful about what I would say I would add first. I don't know if I'm willing to say it, because I think it's very specific to the individual, you know, and their technical abilities and really where they want to go in their practice. And that can change at any point in time, because I'll tell you what, years ago on the podcast, you know what my favorite procedure to do on Monday morning? John knows, and John's same was his too. You know what it was? Root canal, core, and crown.
Yeah.
Root canal, core, and crown. Now I don't do root canals. I died to root canals because I had to give up something. And you know how bad that hurt me? You know how bad that hurt me to give up root canals? It really did, because it's a very business-oriented procedure, and I was very good at it. But I had to give it up. I did my last root canal 2 years ago. It was molar on 18. It actually looked pretty good. I died to it. You have to ride or die at some point. You can't do it all, especially whenever you recognize the fact that you do need interdisciplinary team members. You know, you need specialists. Yeah. You need specialists. We couldn't do what we do without specialists and specialist people that they don't have to exist in our community. That's what's a misnomer, you know? But you need to know people that are way, way higher and better than you. You need specialists. So, you know, what other questions do you have about this?
Well, I have several, but I guess the next one that I would ask, Wes, you mentioned earlier on that you wouldn't recommend somebody to kind of just go seek their individual CEs and piecemeal it together, if you will. So it's a pretty common theme in all of these continuums that they have like an introductory course, and then there's like a stepwise kind of progression that you can take within the I'm assuming that that's why they call it a continuum. But is that kind of a common theme between the four of those?
Yeah, it is. Very, very similar philosophy on it. All starts with understanding how things are positioned in the face. And then from there, it turns into how they work together, you know? And then once you understand how they work together, then you can start developing like, okay, where do I go from here? What other thing do I need to know to diagnose this patient? And then treatment strategies can come off of that tree. So it's all similar. That's why I'm saying you need to talk to someone before you go and take these courses, because the people that taught us, they taught in these other institutions. I mean, this world is pretty small that we're talking about here. So, I mean, most of these people have the same philosophy. It's just which one do you want to go take? To me, it's like you and your friend and somebody else that's taking these courses influencing you on where you should go, you know, and your learning style, because each of them, there's a little difference in the learning style. I feel like
most of these groups have like a core curriculum, a core continuum that will give you how to develop treatment algorithms for almost every type of case that you will encounter, and tell you when you need to refer or what type of referral you might need or how to sequence the case. Then there typically are electives that go beyond that to tell you about things that are very specific, more specific. How to deal with implants versus teeth.
Yeah.
You know, how to deal with more advanced TMD problems. How to deal with, specific procedure types how to be really good at composite or really good at root canals or what, So a lot of these have these electives, if you will, but it's kind of, I would equate it to, core curriculum in college, the things you take for your major, and then the things that you might just be interested in implementing because you think they're interesting or you want to become better at a particular procedure. And those are great, but they all have sort of this core that you're going to take that allows you, the best way to put it is to be able to speak the same language
So here's the
as
thing.
your instructors or be able to speak the same language as the other people that go through the courses.
We've taken a lot of CE over the years, and both of us being in practice and for 20 years and practicing. And the biggest mistakes in CE, in teaching CE, is that you have multiple instructors and they're not calibrated. And the thing about these organizations is you're not going to have people that aren't calibrated. You have people that are humble there enough to talk about these things way behind the scenes before they get up on the podium so that they make sure that he's saying what they're going to say and it's going to complement the next course. Because every one of these courses that I've taken, there's so much calibration going on and so much humbleness between different instructors that they're willing to come back and say, hey, he's right about that. That's the guy you need to talk to about. And here's how that complements what I just showed you. And what I hear about and what I've seen in other piecemeal courses is it's just a bunch of people that got together to put on a course, and man, it's a mess. It's a mess. And their confusion leads to nothing. I mean, it's just confusion. And really then they don't know what. Ask me how I know. Just us trying to come up with a curriculum to teach implants. I mean, it's incredible how difficult that is to get people to agree on anything. And here, that's what some of these organizations have done. Some have done it better than others, and there's reasons why that these four have survived the test of time.
Yeah. I mean, that really speaks to me because I've experienced firsthand instances where one person might be teaching us a specific ideal, and then 1 year later, we get somebody basically saying that anybody who does that doesn't know what they're talking about, and they're practicing in the 50s still. So I've experienced that firsthand, and I definitely understand why it would be valuable to have a completely calibrated kind of environment where everything is kind of like it's all one echo chamber with the same ideals. So that just takes the confusion out of it and gives you more clarity.
And an organization that has a vision for change. I mean, John and I were in the midst of the change whenever they started opening up the idea to what airway, how airway has an impact on patients. Because Frank was talking about it before Jeff Roush came on. We just don't know what the heck's going on. And then all of a sudden, John and I are in the midst of it, and we're sitting there and we're like, holy smokes. And so a willingness to grow even in an organization. And that's one of the reasons we gravitated towards it, because it spoke to us. It's like, hey, they're like us. They don't know all the answers, and they're still figuring it out. Your last question, as we continue on here in the show and just getting ready to finish, was how do we use literature to impact our careers? And we'll kind of close the show with this, is how does it help us make decisions in practice? So recently, and we'll plug our last show, which was about total versus selective etch technique. Marcus Blocks makes a comment in a non-peer-reviewed journal, and I trust Marcus. He's a very trusted individual. We've had him on our show before. But he makes a comment that says that there's long-term degradation consequences to collagenase and by doing total etch technique. And so therefore he does not recommend, or the article says they do not recommend etching dentin. And so I think that's very interesting. And so how does that impact my practice? Well, people start texting me, man. 2 people sent me text. They're reading this stuff. And so why would I read it? To challenge my mindset. Okay, so there's 4 journals on my desk right now. And some of them have impact factor, and we won't get into how to read journal articles. But I was taught in residency, and John was self-taught, and his dad was a journal reader and a CE junkie, and still does, and barely even practices. John, right? I mean, he still comes to some of the meetings. It's fantastic. And so, what I think that's great about that is that you have this mindset of looking at who and what is being said. It doesn't mean it might have an impact, but what can we take from this article that may have some impact on our practice? And then go and ask those people questions. So before the dental guys existed, John and I had a habit of sitting in the front row, or at least up to the front, and we were read enough out of the journal that we were intelligent enough to be able to ask a question after it was over. So we were bold enough, okay, to walk up to the instructor as they came off the stage and said, "Hey, I hear what you're saying. You said this in this article. Can you explain that a little bit more to me?" And that is the crux of the dental guys. We're not afraid to ask questions. And we're not, so the articles challenge our mind and allow us to formulate questions that then we go to the meeting and then seek out the individual that said it, or individuals that are saying the same thing, and then ask them to clarify that so that we can go make maybe a critical change in our practice. Now, that's the thinking of what literature has done for me, and I think maybe for John.
Yeah, I think we, unfortunately, and we try not to rant too much because sometimes it can take away. But unfortunately, one of the things that in dental school, in the rush to try to teach everything, and sometimes in the lack of occasionally calibration, especially when we have a lot of part-time faculty that maybe are not calibrated. Well, not maybe, they just aren't oftentimes. And there's a value to part-time faculty. There's a value to private practice folks coming in and teaching. So don't get me wrong. But often there's not really people being taught how to evaluate literature. And this is a whole other show, which we won't talk about, but there's just a real problem in the United
That
States
show's
of
coming, by the
America.
way, Mohamed. We got a guy coming on. Talk about
just
that.
Just really a lack of teaching of the scientific method in general. And so when people make decisions on what car to buy, they just say, well, I buy Kias because Kia I had was amazing. And, every Kia that I've had has been amazing. Well, does that mean anything? An N of 2? No, it means nothing, right? You've owned 2 cars. They've both been great. Does that mean Kias are great? No. Does that mean Kias are bad? No, it means nothing, right? Because you only have an N of 2, so the study has no power. And no one's teaching this to our general population, but you should expect that, at very least, being a doctor of sort here, you have a doctorate, that someone would teach you how to evaluate literature. But unfortunately, it's not happening many times. And so we see students coming out and they think, they get all twisted about, I hate statistics. I hear it all the time. And it's because you're not taught the value of statistics in the standpoint of how to make decisions. And you don't have to know everything, but if you don't know why you're using what you're using in your practice, if you don't know why, if you don't know what it's based on, and I'm not talking about crazy things, I'm talking about what bonding material you're using, what composite you're using, what implant you're using, what basics. If you don't have any literature support, you don't even know who are the experts in the field. I mean, what type of doctor are you? I would say, what type of doctor are you? If you don't know that, then you're not, in my opinion, practicing to a standard that we should be practicing to. So how does that affect our daily life? Well, you better believe that as much as I can, every product in my practice, I have a reason as to why it's there. I have a reason as to why it's there. You better believe the freaking heart surgeon knows that about their stent. You better believe they know the literature, because they don't have a little cottage practice like we do, where we can just kind of do whatever.
Stuff either. You're not just going on Instagram and Facebook and saying, I saw this last night, and you're going into the practice and doing it. That's not good evidence.
So we got to be open to not only reading these things and being critical, We've also got to be open to being questioned about why is it. That should be awesome for us. We should look forward to those discussions. It should
awesome.
be one of the most fun things that we do is to say, hey, did you see that article by Marcus Blotz on that? What do you think about that? You say not etched dentin? That's crazy. Or is it not? Well, let's have a counterpoint about that, because if not, what kind of doctor are we? Are we just going, oh, I like the way this composite feels on my hand because it feels more like butter instead of, like peanut butter? Like, this is ridiculous. So that's my rant, but it's the point of like literature. The value of literature is that it should be driving our decisions much in the way that we should be having all the things that we choose in hopefully our lives have some basis other than just, a feeling or something that someone else told us. And so as we talk about like going and seeking out the next kind of level of your education, whether that just be the basics, whether that be going through a continuum that's comprehensive, whatever it is, that's another thing that has to be a part of it, in my opinion, is it's, asking the question when the rep comes to your office with a new product or comes to the school, I would challenge you to ask, and this is for you, Mohamed, go back and you ask that faculty member, why do we use this product? Why do we use this bonding material? And I'm not saying being a jerk, but just, hey, why did we choose Curve versus 3M? Or why did we choose OptiBond Solo versus the single bottle? Or why are we using, Prime and Bond NT instead of this? Or just basics. Why do we use the composite that we use? And see if people know, and you'll be surprised, I think. And there'll be people that will. And those are the people you want to hang with.
So,
Like, you know what? I've looked at that.
People have to understand is that being a scientist and a practicing dentist has to complement one another, has to be a balance. And either you're going to do the science and figure it out yourself, or you're going to read the science, or you're going to go to someone that can tell you the science, okay? And so the thing is that you have to be prepared to be wrong. And honestly, at this point in my career, I really want to be wrong more than I want to be right. And I have to say that in a humble way, because I feel like that I've been wrong more than I've been right. And I do, like Frank said, I wish I knew now what I once thought I knew then. I mean, I used to think I knew a lot. I don't. And I'm glad that I want to continue to learn. And so what qualifies the CE that we take? Man, we want to take it from somebody that is ready to be wrong about what they're teaching and ready to kind of grow with you. And that takes a very, very humble person. And I will say one of the main reasons that we chose Spear Education is that I talked to somebody and John talked to people, and we heard that Frank was a humble individual that cared about his patients and wanted to pursue excellence. And I will say, knowing Frank personally now and being able to talk with him and spend time with him, and knowing Greg and Bob more now, is that I feel like that they embody that, what I just said. They're ready to be wrong because they want what's best. And they're ready to help challenge others to think about that. I can't tell you what to do next. I can just ask you questions and challenge you. And that's what it's about. That's the growth path. And so, Mohamed, I'll give you the last word. And as we close the show.
Well, I mean, I can't have the last word because I have a question.
We'll close the show, but you can have the last question. One final one.
Yeah. So this question I feel like is really critical because like you both mentioned, we really aren't armed, especially if you're not going to any type of residency. If you're graduating dental school and you're going to go into practice, you're really not armed to be able to comb through the literature or even know what good literature is. So would you both say that starting out, it would be okay to find one of these continuums or one of these places or a mentor that you really trust and just listening to them while you learn how to consume the literature and think for yourself.
Seeking
Yeah,
out
absolutely. I
someone.
think
Absolutely.
it's a great start, is to,
Mm.
when in doubt, have somebody that has done hopefully the heavy lifting and has devoted themselves to learning how to consume and then consuming that and trying to be a curator
Mhm.
of the research for their practice. And hopefully you can become part of that, whether that's in a practice setting, which is the best, whether that's a specialist who you sit down with and you go, hey, what's the latest on perio? Like, where do you get your information? And what do you know that I don't know? What about implant dentistry?
Mm.
Find out, sit down with people that have done the research, hopefully, and develop those relationships. But I do think, though, while you're in school, you have this invaluable learning opportunity to find people that are currently involved
Yeah.
in research or in evaluating research. Those people are in school. I guarantee you might not know who they are because unfortunately no one's freaking talking about it. But the truth is there's people at every school that this is what they do every day. And it's driving them insane that people are not asking them what they know, because they actually are the ones we should be talking to, instead of, and again, forgive me because private practice people are great, instead of people who are just doing whatever they're doing because they're doing it.
Let me
And
tell you
so
right
we need to
now.
seek those people out. We seek them out now in dental school if you can. It's an unbelievable opportunity. And then when we get out, it gets
Mm.
harder. It
Hmm.
gets harder. You have to find people who you have to kind of prove almost that they are really, like, where do they get their information? How do they figure it out? It becomes challenging. And once you find those people are gold. Those people, it's like finding a good anything in life, a good plumber, a good mechanic. You know that they're going to do the right thing. You can stop asking questions. Just go, hey, what are you doing? And I'm just going to do what you're doing. And that's really, in the end, the goal with all the stuff we're talking about is like, it's trust but verify. But it's amazing when you get to a point with, whether it's a continuum or a mentor or a specialist, where you go, hey, look, I don't even need to like, I know what you're going to do is going to be the best. I just want to emulate you. And that is a beautiful thing when you can have both. But as a starting point, seek those people out, whether it's in school, whether it's mentorship after, whether it's specialists, because there are people waiting, just waiting to be able to share with you what they've learned and have a discussion with you about why, and give you a few papers to take home and read, which you should take home and read,
Yep.
and then come back and go, hey, look, man, I don't even know how to digest this. Help me. And they will help to guide you, and they will help to pass that knowledge on. And then you then can turn around at some point and hopefully have the opportunity to lift up the next, generation after you.
Mohamed, this has been fantastic. And we appreciate you kind of reaching out to us via text and starting this whole thing. And this has been a great podcast. Again, if you have listened to this, but you didn't hear the first part of the show, I feel like you need to go back and like pick up the beginning of this where we talk about the definition of comprehensive dentistry. It'll really shed some light on some of the conversation we had here. So be sure to check out Very Dental podcast and the student segment that was released a week or so ago. So appreciate Mohamed, you being on the show. Good luck to you, and we look forward to hearing great things, as I know that you are wanting to pursue excellence in dentistry, it sounds like. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. And you guys are a real inspiration, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing.
John, listen, 865-544-8954. Are you a dental geek, a dental nerd? That's what we're talking about right here. Find the people, John, that are around you that are geeks, nerds. You know who my favorite professor was in dental school? Dr. Bagby. Well, you know why? Because he was a material nerd, a scientist that was talking about curing lights. And at the time, LEDs weren't a thing yet, but they were coming on. And he and I were looking at what the heck's going on with curing lights? So we started a research project on curing lights. And then I had another professor that I kind of geeked out with that was passionate. And we ended up I get it because I was passionate about him. He let me place a dental implant on a patient in dental school in 2002. And so
Love
what
it.
happens is that passion fuels passion. And so just like Sarah at the beginning of the show, we talked about, who reached out to the dental guys via text, you can reach out to the dental guys, 865-544-8954. Hey, what CE have you taken? Have you taken Spear, Coist, Pankey, any of those? Leave the comments. Send us a message below. John, this has been a great show. Super excited about this show. And I'm super excited about what's to come on the Dental Guys.
That's right. Just as we always say, your reviews and your subscriptions and you tuning in is what makes us better. So like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your colleagues, tell your dental school classmates. The Dental Guys is where it's at. We're going to keep bringing quality content like we always do. So for Wes, I'm John. We are